It's time to take your seat in the front row with Mike Vaccaro. Here's your host, Mike Vaccaro.
Thank you, Chuck, and welcome once again in the front row. I'm your host, Mike Vaccaro. Behind the scenes is J.R. Quitman, our creator, producer, and director. Well, we're talking a little football here today, and for that, we're going north. We're going to Buffalo as we're sitting down with the Buffalo Bills general manager, Brandon Beane. Being a guy who started as an intern with the Carolina Panthers, worked his way up to interim GM, assistant GM, and now in his fourth season as a general manager for the Buffalo Bills, has that organization turned around and has that organization looking for a chance to get to the Super Bowl and eventually win it as well. So great conversation, a guy who started in Wilmington, North Carolina, UNCW. He's a North Carolina guy, now applying his trade in Orchard Park, New York. This episode of In the Front Row with Mike Vaccaro is the Buffalo Bills general manager, Brandon Beane. Well, Brandon, once again, this is obviously a busy time for you right in the middle of an NFL season. You're taking the time out of your schedule to join us, and we certainly appreciate that and appreciate you spending some time with us here today.
No, I'm glad to be here, Mike. Always enjoy catching up with anybody from down in Wilmington area. I don't get back there enough, but winter's coming here shortly, so that's when you really think about getting to a beach or something once the snow starts arriving here in Buffalo.
Yeah, winter in Buffalo is certainly a long way from your roots here in North Carolina. We're going to get into a lot of that. We'll get into your time at UNCW. But let's start at the very beginning for you. You're from Norwood, North Carolina, Stanley County, around the Charlotte area, but population, I guess, of about 3,000 or so. What was life like for you growing up in Norwood, and how much were sports a part of you growing up there?
Yeah, Norwood is a very rural area. A lot of farming, and we had a factory or two. But it was Little League sports was everything. And then high school, and it was I grew up playing football, basketball, baseball, and golf. Whatever time of year it was, I was going to do that, because if I wasn't doing that, I was probably going to be working in the yard or doing whatever it took. Just trying to basically keep myself busy. Was kind of the way I was raised. If my parents both worked, and wasn't a lot of sitting around, like get up and do something, be productive. So that's kind of the how I was raised in Norwood and Stanley County.
Who introduced you to all those sports growing up?
Yeah, it was my dad. He I started at 8 with I probably started basketball maybe 6 or 7, but football you were allowed to pad up and play at 8 years old, and did that. And then Little League baseball. And so played them all. Started golf when I was about 7. So really enjoyed, playing sports in the area, and still have a lot of friends that I stay connected with, and especially, some of them I'll still golf with here or there if I can make it down that way.
Early on, was there a sport that you gravitated to a little bit more than the others?
Football was the one that I definitely was the most passionate about. Now, as soon as football was over, I'd had enough, and I was excited about basketball, and kind of the same thing. You're inside in the winter playing basketball, and here comes baseball, and you're excited to get out there. So I really enjoyed being able to play, and I'm a big advocate of kids playing. I know there's a lot of times now people will do the specialized training, and they'll play one sport, all year long. And I'm not saying that's the wrong way. That's just not the way I believe in. I think it's good. And I think, there's a lot of different skills that you learn from one sport that will help you in another, that if you didn't play that, whether it's hand-eye, whether it's your foot quicks, your lateral quicks, whatever it is. And a lot of the guys, here in the NFL I talked to, they didn't just play football. They played, most sports, at least 2 sports. And I think it's important. Sometimes I think as parents, I want, little Johnny to be the best baseball player ever, and we're not going to let him play football or basketball.
So as a GM, we'll get to some more of this later, but are you looking at the history of some of the players that you're looking to sign, you're looking to draft, and seeing, do they have diversity in their background as far as sports are concerned?
Yeah, listen, we don't hold it against them, but we do like to understand what they grew up doing. wrestling is a sport that, I didn't do, but had some friends, and Sean McDermott, who's our head coach here, was a big time wrestler. And we talk about it, the leverage game as a lineman, offense or defense. A lot of those guys, a lot of the really skilled ones, they wrestled at one point. So we ask and try and learn, we get some guys that ran the 100-meter track, and some guys that are playing tight end or a position that you wouldn't think. You always think receivers are fast, but there's some guys that were really good high school track athletes, whether it was, like I said, the 100 or some relay deals. So it's always good to kind of see what their path was and what their journey was and how they did. Was it some of these guys? I mean, we've come across guys that didn't play football until their junior year of high school, which would be hard to believe. But their parents or something had kept it away from them with, the health concerns that sometimes people have had with football, and all of a sudden they get a chance to play it. Maybe they wouldn't have played it if they didn't play any other sports, but whether it's basketball, sometimes you'll see basketball players, become defensive ends or tight ends in our league. And some coach said, "Hey man, I know you're a really good basketball player. You're not going to make the NBA, but if you come work with me, I think I can help you get a college scholarship." And, 5-6 years later, they're in the NFL.
Yeah, I'm sure, as an NFL GM, you've got to look and explore every opportunity when it comes to players and athletes that they can be. For you, again, you started to gravitate, I guess, in high school more to football, and you were playing football, and unfortunately an injury kind of ended your career on the football field. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, it was that was a crushing blow. But I look at it now as a blessing in disguise. I didn't see the Lord's plan for me. And, but, first game, senior year, first quarter, tear my ACL, and, you're devastated. I didn't even know what an ACL was, to be honest with you. That was 1993, and I had never heard of it. I know it had happened, but and I'll never forget the trainer that we had. The South Stanley High School that I went to was a 1A, 2A school. But he had been a longtime trainer there, and he said, "I've never had a player that's torn an ACL." He said, "This is what it feels like." I'll never forget him saying that to my dad. Like, "I'm pretty sure this is what it feels like. I've gone to clinics and things like that. I've never had one." He rode with us to Salisbury, North Carolina the next day, and we saw, the orthopedic that he recommended, and that guy confirmed. And, I'm still thinking, well, let's brace it up. Let me rehab it. I had hurt my knee in basketball the year before, not to this extent, and had rehabbed it and came back. And that's kind of what my initial thought was. And then, of course, you find out you can't play. So it knocks you not only out of football, but out of basketball. I did wear a brace that year and play golf. One of the only guys walking the golf course with a knee brace on. But I tell you what it did, though. It changed my journey. After I had surgery and was rehabbing, it was a difficult time for me as a senior, watching all my buddies getting to play sports and I can't play. My high school football coach, who was the AD, asked me, about 3 weeks before basketball started. He said, "Hey, listen, I know you're out, but I got an idea." And he said, we need a boys basketball coach for the junior high team. We got the same coach coaching the girls and the boys, and it's hard on his time, and we'd love for you to coach that. And I'm telling you, I lit up like a Christmas tree. I thought it was the coolest idea. And other than getting thrown out of one game for not controlling my emotions, everything else was good. And I probably learned more than the kids learned, but it really energized me to come be a coach, which is how I ended up in the seat I am today.
Yeah, head coaching kind of took you in that direction. Let's go back to the injury. What was your position, and do you remember how the injury happened?
Yeah, so I played quarterback all through high school, but the year before I'd gotten hurt, so another kid also played quarterback. So we kind of had a 2-quarterback system. If one of us was at quarterback, the other one would play receiver, and we both played DB. So we both played both ways, and it was literally the first. We had just intercepted a ball. They got the ball first. It's crazy how I can remember this, but we had intercepted a pass. He had intercepted it, and first drive, he's going to play quarterback. So I'm playing receiver. We threw a slant route to the opposite side. And so I went to block the guy that was coming to make tackle. It was a middle linebacker. And when I blocked him in the open field, my leg just stuck in the ground and kind of did a negative, like real quick like that. And I knew something bad was wrong. I didn't know what. I walked off and tried to run on it, and I couldn't. Again, I had no idea what it was. And I'm still thinking that night, like, 2 or 3 weeks, I'll rehab this. I'm coming back. And then unfortunately the next day on a Saturday, we went to Salisbury and found out that I was done for the year.
Yeah. And back in the early 90s, as you said, there's probably an injury that would last a year or more with the rehab, even on the professional level. So again, at one point, did you think head coaching at some level was going to be, where you were going? And is that what you were looking into when it came time college-wise at that point?
Yeah, it was. I applied to several schools. UNCW was my number one. And so when I got in there, I just my parents had told me that, listen, you stay in state, we're going to help you pay for it. Colleges were much more affordable in the early 90s, especially being if you stay in state. So that was the school. I had always enjoyed being at the beach and just thought, man, I'd love to go there and do that. And so I went there and said, you know what, I'm going to be a teacher. So I started as an education major, and I'm going to come back and coach high school football and maybe one day work my way to be a college coach. And I was on that path, Mike, until second semester of my sophomore year. I just started dreaming bigger and just started saying, and I spoke to someone had introduced me over the phone to a guy from the Orlando Magic. And I don't remember the gentleman's name anymore, but he was in like a player development type role. And I just was asking him, about various roles and whether it was PR, whether it was marketing, whether it was basketball operations, and it really, this guy made me feel like he had come up similar to me, and I knew the area he was from. And like, if he could do it, why couldn't I do it? And so I started talking to Frank Trimble, from UNCW, and he was, the leader of the communications department at the time. And he, basically just said, listen, this is what I'm thinking. And he had stressed to me, we can help you as a switch your major as a communications, because I had taken a couple communications classes, do that. And we can help you, whatever from a PR standpoint, however you think you need to get in there. He was explaining to me, some majors kind of tighten what you can do. This one, everybody needs to know how to communicate, and whether it's public speaking, whether it's writing, whatever it is. And that will give you a broad scope to kind of pick your course. And he said the main thing you're going to need to do is internships, which was the best advice. Internships weren't as big in the early 90s. Now almost every school requires them, but that's probably the best advice that I got. And I didn't know a lot of people that were doing them, some of whether it was my roommates or friends in their industry. Most people were just going 4 years, working side jobs, and then going to apply for, a job when they graduated. But I did a couple of internships, and I think that set me apart to help me get my foot in the door with the Carolina Panthers.
Well, and I guess, during that time, it was the Panthers were just coming into existence, right? Was it kind of perfect timing for you to be there in those early stages and, start maybe as low as you could, but then obviously give yourself a chance to work your way up?
Yeah, I definitely think it did. The Panthers, I got to UNCW in 94. So you would have been talking about spring of 96 when I, changed my mind. And the Panthers' first season was 95. They played at Clemson that year. 96, they had a really good year. They went to the NFC Championship, lost in Green Bay. And I grew up a Washington Redskin fan. I wasn't a real Panther fan at that time. But I was familiar with them. I'm watching them, and I obviously know they're the closest team, 4 hours away from Wilmington, if I want to go there. So I actually applied, Mike, to the Charlotte Hornets and the Carolina Panthers. And the first time I applied to both, they told me no. And so that was after my junior year. The spring of my junior year, as I'm completing that year, I applied to both, and both of them said no. But I did forge a little bit of a relationship with a guy named Bruce Spate, who is with the Panthers now. He actually went to the Jets as their PR director and is now returned to Carolina. But Bruce kind of gave me some advice and what to do. And lo and behold, my sister knew. She worked in the same building. She was a CPA at the time. She still is, but she was working in the same office building with a guy named John Rocco, who ran the Charlotte Touchdown Club. And she asked him, does he need any help? And she had been to some of their luncheons where they bring in ex-NFL coaches or players to speak, and they raise money for scholarship athletes in the Charlotte area. So he said, yeah, I'd love to have Brandon come in here and help me. He can work with me all summer. He goes, bad news is I can't pay him a dime. So I went and did a 10-week internship with John Rocco that summer as soon as classes were done in May, and stayed with him, through July, early August before coming back to school, and I slept on my sister's couch, in Concord, North Carolina. She was nice enough to let me do that, and would a lot of times ride to work with her because her parking was paid for, and I was trying to save every dime I could. So when it worked out, I didn't drive because I knew I had to pay to park, but did that, and then went back for my senior year. And I'll never forget, Rocco called me in early February and said, listen, Dom Capers, who was the Panthers' first coach, is going to be speaking at our luncheon in, I believe it was late March, early April. He said, you need to come back here and work this. And so I took a day off of classes, drove back, and left early that morning. The luncheon started, like 11. I got there around, 9:30 or 10, helped him run this luncheon. And I met Bruce Spate in person, which was good. I had only met him through a phone, through faxing him. Can you believe we're talking about faxes? But I kept going to the Kinko's on College Road to fax him my resume and stuff like that, and finally put a name with a face, and he was able to see me work, and of course John Rocco had met him too and put in a good word for me. So after that, Bruce called me and said, hey, it was nice meeting you. I'd like for you to interview. I'm going to be starting interviews again. I know we didn't select you last year. And sure enough, they hired me for a training camp internship, basically a 6-week deal. And that's how I truly got started.
So it started though with the rejection, like you said, from the Hornets and the Panthers the first time. And what's going through your mind where you had the aha moment of what you want to do, and then you get the rejection? How do you kind of keep yourself in the game, if you will, and keep pursuing what you want to pursue here?
Yeah, I didn't expect to get it. I to be honest with you, I didn't even know if somebody would return my call. I mean, I grew up in a very rural area, and I wanted to go see the Washington Redskins play a live football game growing up. And my dad couldn't get tickets. Like, there was no StubHub and all that stuff. You call a number, and the Washington Redskins were so good when I was growing up that there was waiting lists for years, is what my dad would tell me. And he couldn't afford to pay. We weren't poor, but he couldn't afford to pay to drive us up there and pay scalper's price and do all that. That wasn't an option. And I was never able to do that. I mean, I thought it was amazing that people were able to go to an NFL game. And I was able to go to a couple of Charlotte Hornet games, in high school through my dad's company, but these were like nosebleed seats. But it was awesome to me to even be able to do that. Holy cow. That's, Muggsy Bogues down there, and, Alonzo Mourning, and those guys were, the early Hornets, in the early 90s. So to me, I didn't even know if I'd get a phone call back, but I'm like, I'm going to try it. And if I try for so long and I can't get anywhere, then I'll go back to my plan and be a high school coach and see if I can prove myself to be a college coach or something like that.
Well, things certainly worked out well for you. As you said, you started really low with the Panthers, but so you take this internship. I mean, what was your plan from that point on? And did you envision or think you were going to continue to move up and up and up with the Panthers?
Yeah, I didn't know. I guess what I did, I just took it one day at a time. And what I said was, when I first got there, I had the internship for the month. Well, then I was actually home, Mike, for a week or two, but I had told Bruce Spate, and I'd met a couple people on the football side. I said, listen, I enjoy PR, but I really think I'd like to work on the football side in football operations. And Mike, I got a lucky break. Literally, the guy who was going to be the season intern in player development / football ops, he left. I don't even know the circumstances, but my internship was up for like 2 weeks. I'm at home, and Bruce called me and said, listen, they're asking if we know anybody over here that worked with us. And I told them about you, that they need an intern for the season, and would you be willing to do it? And I was like, heck yeah, I'll drive there right now. And they were like, no, call this guy and he'll tell you when to come in. I called him, and next morning I showed up, and I was on the football side, and I was in heaven. I mean, I'm like, I can't believe I'm working with Dom Caper's staff, and Marty Herney had just gotten there, and I'm like a kid in a candy store. Whatever you need me to do, I'll be glad to do it. And so I started that year helping player engagement. I would help when I'd get done with that stuff, I'd go down to the equipment room, I'd fold towels, I'd pass out clean laundry, and I would help at practice, basically help the equipment guy clean up the field, shoot jugs to players, catching balls after whatever needed to be done. This was awesome to me. And so picking up guys at the airport, take them for a physical, like a player that we may acquire that we want to bring in, or we're going to try them out. And halfway through the season, the equipment guy, I didn't travel with the team. I just worked home games. But halfway through the year, the head equipment guy, Jackie Miles, who's now with the Giants, he said, hey, I'd like for you to come travel with us and help us on the road. You've done such a good job. And so I went on my first game. We went to San Francisco 49ers. I mean, I'm like, man, I grew up watching games at Candlestick Park, and, whether it was Joe Montana and the big games with the Dallas Cowboys, Deion Sanders playing there, Steve Young. I mean, I was like in awe at where I'm at. Like, this is amazing. And I had no cell phone. I wanted to call my parents and be like, because I knew my dad would be in heaven just knowing what I was doing. But it was amazing. So the rest of the year I did that. The crazy thing was, Mike, we went 4-12 that year. And after the season was over, Mr. Richardson fired all of Dom Caper's staff, and a lot of things were in limbo. And so I was literally thinking, man, I just worked really hard, and I felt like I did a lot of good things, but I think all the people that saw me do those things are about to get fired. Like, what does this mean? And so I was again home for 3 or 4 weeks. He hires George Seifert to be the head coach, and Marty Herney was then promoted to director of football operations. He was just a salary cap guy at that time. He had come over from the Chargers the year before when Bill Polian left to go to the Colts. And so lo and behold, someone gave Marty my name, and including Jackie Miles and a couple others, and said, hey, this guy would be a great football operations guy for you in a full-time role. And so I came in, interviewed with him, and I still bust his chops to this day, but he must have not called me back for over a week. And I'm like, man, I'm telling myself after 2 days, I didn't get this job. Somebody else got it. But I was talking to people in the building. They're like, listen, he hasn't given anybody else yet. He's got a lot of things going. But man, when he called me, I was just jumping for joy. And Mike, I'm telling you, I was still an hourly employee when I started. That year I made $22,000. My wife was a school teacher, and she was still making more than me. And we know school teachers don't rack it up by any means. So, but she was very supportive of all this. And from that point on, that was February 1st of 99 when I got my first full-time job. And from there, just kind of worked my way up.
Well, certainly you showed that, hard work, leads to those opportunities, and you continue to move up. 2008, the director of football operations, interim GM in 2012, the assistant GM 2015, 2016, obviously some great success there. early on, did you feel like you had to prove yourself as a personnel guy on that side because you started in the communications as an intern? Did you put in the hours and the work to kind of show that you belonged in that role with the team?
Yeah, definitely, Mike. I mean, I came up a very non-traditional way to be in the seat I am today. Most people come up as, a college scout or a pro scout. They work their way up to a pro personnel director or college director, and then to a player personnel and then assistant GM. And so, again, I'm not in this seat without Marty Herney, who's now in Washington, coincidentally, the team I grew up rooting for, and the team he started for. He started with the Redskins in like 1986 or 7 and went to the Chargers with Bobby Beathard and then came to Carolina. And his career's gone full circle, and he's back in Washington working with Ron Rivera. But Marty truly, he would just give me like something new every year and just to take off his plate. And he really talked to me as I built a relationship with him about conversations he would have with agents, whether we're going to do a deal with the player or not, and he would, he and the pro scouting director, they would give me guys in the spring when free agency was coming to do basically cut up tapes. Some people refer to them as highlight tapes. You don't want to just make them highlights, but you're basically cutting up a tape. If I want to watch 50 clips of Von Miller or whoever, you just flip it on and this is going to it's a summary tape. This is going to kind of tell you who this player is real quick. And if a coach has 20 guys to watch, it just helps them speed up the process. So I would literally go watch hours of film and just in the spring and cut this up. And it allowed me to, while I'm doing football operations, running our travel, handling the budgets for the training room, the equipment room, our travel, player costs, whatever it was, it allowed me at a time when things would be slow, the season's over, to hone in on those skills. And I had access to our scouting database. And so I could read reports. And so I would watch a player. I would try to watch a good player. One of the scouts told me this one time. He said, watch one of the best players at a corner, at a receiver, and go read some of our reports on them and how we're identifying the skill sets that this player has. Because that's what you're doing as you scout. You're drawing a picture for someone as if they've never seen the player. And the clear, and that's what I tell my scouts today. I want you to assume that I'm never going to see this player. I've never seen him. I don't know who Aaron Rodgers is. I want you to draw me the picture of who Aaron Rodgers is as if I've never seen him. And then I'll flip the film on. So that gave me an introduction to do that while I was still making sure all of my other tasks were done. And again, 2012, I get this, the weirdest break ever, even though it was uncomfortable for me because Marty Herney's getting fired and Jerry Richardson decides to put me in the seat of interim GM at 36 years old. I was excited, yet I was sad for my mentor at the same time. But he's the first guy I called before I called my wife, before I called anybody. Mr. Richardson, names me that. I go back to my office, shut my door, and nobody in the building knows what's going on. He's going to tell the staff in like 2 or 3 hours. But I go and call Marty, and I'm like, Marty, I'm so sorry. And he's like, Brandon, he's like, you're ready for this. You got this. I needed this break. I'm here for you. Whatever you need, you call me anytime, day or night. I mean, what a selfless person who's just been fired and has got to worry about his next job is telling me, go crush it. Like, I got you. I'll help you with anything. And he filled me in on conversations he was having with agents, where certain things were. I mean, and I called him several times during the, 10 or 11 weeks that we had left in the season and got his advice on things. And it's funny, we still talk several times a week now that he's in Washington and I'm here in Buffalo.
Yeah, it certainly shows just the business, the nature of the business of pro sports, certainly. And when you have friends like that, I think that's great that you had that conversation with him taking over. So like you said, that was 2012, assistant GM, 15 through 16. You guys had great success. 5 NFC South titles, 2 NFC Conference championships. Did you think that you were never going to leave the Panthers? Did you think that you were a lifer there with Carolina?
Yeah, I really did. I never saw myself leaving. And it's funny, like a couple of times, I said to my wife, I was like, you never know, like we could get, there were times where like even when Marty was, that year started when I got the interim GM job. That year, Cam Newton, it was Cam Newton's second year. Cam had his really good rookie of the year campaign, and there were high expectations for our season. We had just drafted Luke Kuechly, which people didn't realize how good Luke really was at the time. But we started 1-5, and I knew when we were about 1-3, 1-4, there was getting a lot of pressure in the building. You felt it. And me as one of Marty Herney's right-hand guy, a lot of times that means you're gone too. And so I'd had conversations with my wife, and she was like, we're not going anywhere cold, no Green Bay, no Buffalo. No, I mean, she named several cities. And so it's really funny how this all worked out. But I never thought I would leave Carolina, especially, when I survived that and Dave Gettleman comes in, who I did not know, and we formed a really good relationship. And, as much as I wanted that job, I had hoped when I was the interim, I was hoping they would give me the job full time. And I thought I'd, done what I needed to do. And Ron Rivera had really wanted me to get that. But it wasn't meant to be. And there was a different plan. And so I had to adapt and adjust. And again, Dave Gettleman, who's with the Giants now, is a great friend, and really I root for his success as well. And he helped me. He really did. There were some things that, Dave came in as truly a scout, and I thought we were a good blend, and that he had never really worked running the football operations, the stuff that leading a training room, leading all these other staffs in football ops that you have to. He had just been in the personnel world, which can sometimes be where you'll see GMs fall. They've never done anything but scout. And so I thought we were a great blend. He taught me some things that I still needed to learn as an evaluator that helped me, have success here in Buffalo. So things happen when they're supposed to. But I never saw myself leaving Carolina. I thought I would ride that out. And when Jerry Richardson hired Dave Gettleman, he told me, he said, listen, he said, Brandon, I hired, an older GM knowing he's only going to be here so long. You've got to keep learning and growing, and you'll get your opportunity. And so I kind of thought, listen, I'll ride this out, and assuming we have success, then hopefully I'm the next in line. And after a couple of years is when Gettleman promoted me to assistant GM. So I'm like, this is perfect. Hopefully in, 4, 5, 6 years, he'll be ready to hang it up and turn it over to me. But I got this opportunity in Buffalo in 2017, and it was just too good to pass up.
Well, let's talk about that and how that materialized. Again, 19 years overall with the Panthers. Like you said, you never thought you would leave, and you did a great job, it sounds like, to kind of swallow your pride a little bit and be that number 2 guy and be patient. But then this opportunity materializes. How did it all come about?
Yeah, so, that earlier that year I had interviewed, it's funny how this all works out. So Sean McDermott was our defensive coordinator in Carolina, and Sean and I were, I'd say, work friends. We had 6 or 7 of us that liked to jog. I was into running a little bit. I'd run a marathon. I actually ran in Wilmington, the marathon in 2010. And so there was 6, 7 of us on road trips or in training camp. We'd get out and run anywhere from 4 to 10 miles. And so you get on some conversations and you talk, and Sean and I would have conversations once in a while in the offense, in the office, about his defense and how I saw players, how, especially in the off season, like, what are our needs? What does he see our needs as the coach? And he wanted to know, what does the front office see as the perceived needs? What's the plan? Like, are we going to re-sign this player? Where are we thinking in the draft? Things like that. But, I knew he wanted to be a head coach. He knew I wanted to be a GM. We never had a plan of, hey, if I'm the GM, I'll hire you as the coach. Or if you're the coach, you'll tell the owner to look at me as a GM or anything like that. It just, we never went there. But, Sean and I both got asked to interview with the San Francisco 49ers job that ended up going to Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. And so we ended up being on a private plane together for a couple hours The interview actually took place in New York. Their ownership they did some interviews on the West Coast, and they kind of worked their way across the country. So they flew us up to New York and had us plus 5 or 6 other candidates fly to New York to interview with them in a hotel. And so Sean and I flew home from New York, and he had also interviewed for this job in Buffalo. And he was waiting to hear back if he was going to get a second interview. And neither one of us got the 49er job. And, 2 or 3 days later, he gets a call to come be the head coach at Buffalo. And on that flight, though, we talked about, some of the things where he had interviewed, and I talked to him about the various people I knew in Buffalo. He interviewed with the Chargers, I think, as well. So I talked to him about various things. And it was probably one of our deepest conversations about running a team and, my viewpoint from a GM and hearing his, from a coach and how he would lay things out. And so we probably got deeper there than we ever had. And so he takes the job, and I wish him well. And we go on that spring, and lo and behold, after the draft, Terry Pagula, the owner here in Buffalo, lets go of Doug Whaley, who was Sean's GM. And so they asked Sean for, some names, and I think he gave him a couple. And I think he definitely probably had me at the top of his list. I don't know that. You'd have to ask him. I've never asked him that, but they interviewed 4 people. They had their own list too. And, fortunately I was the one that was selected, but it was an interesting interview because it was my second one. I felt way better about it. When I left the San Francisco interview, I didn't feel like I really got to lay out how I would do it. This one, I felt like Terry and Kim Pagula it was a 4-hour and 50-minute interview, nonstop. Just like we're talking now, it went, other than going to the bathroom, 5 or 10 minutes and grabbing a quick bite. We literally kept the interview going while we ate lunch. And I really felt when I walked out there, like, if they don't like me, it's okay. I laid everything out. And if they like my plan, great. If they don't, I got no regrets. I felt like I had some regrets with that San Fran. I really just felt like I could never get deep enough with them. They were kind of controlling the interview. And this one, I felt like they truly, while they asked me their questions, they allowed me to lead the interview process. And I was interviewing them as well. I wanted to know why Buffalo had lost for 17 years in a row. They had bought the team, several years earlier, so it wasn't all on them. And I gave them my opinions. I heard what theirs were. But before I left Carolina, which was a very stable organization at the time under Jerry Richardson, I had to know that there was going to be a chance to turn this thing around. And that was one of the biggest questions. I said, how do I know if you offer me this job that you're not going to fire me after 2 years because we haven't won? And I said, I went through the reasons why this was going to take time and all the moves that had to be made. And they said, well, we gave our head coach a 5-year deal. We plan to give whoever we hire as the GM a 5-year deal. And I just said, that makes a lot of sense. And I hope that whoever you hire, you'll let them play that deal out before you, move on. At least give them 4 or 5 years to show that they can build it the right way.
Well, May 9th, 2017, you were named the Bills general manager, but I'm sure before you were sold on them, you had to sell this to your family. Like you said, your wife, Haley, said, no, nowhere cold, no Green Bay, no Buffalo. So this was one of those places that she said no to. How did you convince her, honey, this has to happen?
Yeah. I give the credit to her. She knew, listen, she let me work as a $5.15 an hour intern while she was teaching school. So she knew this was my dream. And she was like, listen, if you think it's right, if you feel like you're going to have a chance to show your talents and what you can do, and you feel this is right, we'll support it. Like we'll go. And so she was all on board. Honestly, it was, my agent was calling me, telling me, listen, we've got a deal close. They want you, blah, blah, blah. As we're getting, now it's like, man, I'm really packing up. And I had, a rising freshman in high school and a rising 7th grader. And I knew, that wasn't going to fly well with them. They had both grown up pretty much in the same house. We were living in Fort Mill, South Carolina. And so they had their whole neighborhood of friends. We were about to turn their life upside down. And I actually had probably the biggest doubts at the last minute, not because of this, but just, they were at a tough time of their life to pull them out of schools, neighborhoods, everything, sports, whatever it was that they were, and it was very tough. That was the part, watching, them cry, and they didn't want to leave their friends. And, but it all worked out. And I think my son that was a freshman, now he's a freshman in Alabama now. And he told me, he said it definitely has made his transition easier there, of having to move to a new spot and meet new friends, because he went to Alabama and didn't know anybody again. And it wasn't his first time having to do that. So it was tough, and there were some rough moments from a family standpoint as they were blending in to a new environment here. But I do think it helped them.
Yeah, so often as fans, you see the coaches come and go and move around, the GMs, but you forget about the families of all these folks. So that's certainly something to consider. Well, again, you're there, and probably I would say the biggest role of a GM is getting that franchise quarterback, right? So 2017, you had that year, and then the draft comes up 2018. Was that, the number one priority for you? And did you feel like this is something that I've got to get right?
Yeah, no doubt. This is a quarterback league. If you've ever listened to any of my press conferences up here, especially early on, I stress that to the media, and I stress that in the interview. That's, one of the things that I told the Pagulas in that interview was 17 years, you've never had a franchise quarterback, and you've changed coaches and GMs way too often. And it wasn't just them, it's the organization. Like I said, they bought it in 2014. So it went back to Ralph Wilson's days as well. But since that group of Jim Kelly, Thurman Thomas, Andre Reed, Bruce Smith, since that group left and Jim left, they never found that franchise quarterback, and they never found a head coach that could last long enough, rightly or wrongly, I don't know. But either way, so, you're going to have to give me and Sean McDermott a chance here. But the one thing that we have to do as an organization is we have to find a franchise quarterback. And that draft, I knew, and, I kind of talked to them about some guys in the interview that I knew would be coming out the next year. Josh was one of the names mentioned. I mentioned about 6 or 7 guys that we would need to really scout. And I said, we're going to have to get some draft capital too. So we may have to make some moves. And, that summer in 17, we traded Sammy Watkins. We traded Ronald Darby. We traded Marcel Darius. We traded Reggie Ragland. Basically pieces that we didn't see here for the long term, that let's go ahead and turn these players into assets to make sure wherever we finish this year, whether we don't win any games or whether we win the Super Bowl, which I knew we weren't going to win the Super Bowl, but that we can have enough draft capital to go up and get the player that we want, assuming there's a guy we like. And we went through that whole 2017 fall. And then, through this process, there were some very good options, but Josh Allen was the guy that we really honed in as the guy that would fit Buffalo. Big, strong, play in this weather, athletic, just needed some seasoning. And it all worked out for us to work our way. We had some good fortune that we had to work our way from pick 21. I traded a tackle in Cordy Glenn to go to 12. And then on draft day, worked to deal with the Tampa Bay Bucks to go from 12 to 7. And, lucky for us, there were some other quarterbacks that people coveted that allowed Josh to slide to 7, and we nabbed him there.
Yeah, 2018. How about this? Baker Mayfield 1, Sam Darnold 2, Josh Allen was 7, ahead of Josh Rosen and Lamar Jackson. So, some other guys that you passed up on, but, you engineer those deals, those trades to move up. You still keeping your fingers crossed that it's going to fall the way you want and the way you hope to get this guy?
Yeah, you definitely. I mean, I didn't sleep well for a couple of days, and I was trying to do a lot of research, whether it was friends in the media, whether it's guys on other teams. What are you hearing? And, I had put together my intel that, about 48 hours before the draft, that Cleveland was down to Josh Allen or Baker, and that the Giants were going to pick Saquon at 2. We had tried to trade up with a lot of these teams. I was willing to pay King's ransom to go up to 2 to get Josh if he was there, and the Giants stayed and took Saquon. The Jets, I was told was either going Darnold or Baker, so I knew Josh wasn't going there. And then Cleveland had the 4th pick. They were picking 1, so they weren't going to pick a quarterback. And so I actually had a deal, Mike, with Denver. John Elway and I struck a deal about 10 minutes before the draft started on draft night. And he said, Brandon, there's a player, though. If he's there, I'm not going to do this deal. So I truly had told our ownership and Sean McDermott, like, listen, I'm going to be able to get to 5, and I think we'll be able to get Josh there. And Denver gets on the clock, and they thought Cleveland was going to take the defensive end Bradley Chubb from NC State, but they took Ward from Ohio State, the corner. And so Elway calls me and says, Brandon, I'm sorry, the guy we want is Chubb. He's there. And I'm like, oh, my God. So we had been on the phone with Indy. They were at 6, and Ballard was like, no, I'm not moving. I've already moved back from 3 to 6. And it's funny, Joe Shane, my assistant GM, had initiated the call with Tampa. We kind of picked who we were going to call, and he had initiated, and they were like, no, we're not moving. But when we got on the clock, we went back and forth, and Jason Licht was asking, for a lot. And I get it. He knew we were trying to trade it for a quarterback, but we went back and forth. He hung up one time, said he'd call me back. I hung up a time and finally just said, all right, if you'll do this, we'll do it. And he took the deal. And so we went up and got Josh. And it was a huge relief to have that. And we really felt that if we got Josh in here and we stuck by him and we developed him the right way, that we could have a piece that we'd be proud of for a long time.
Yeah. So you get the guy you want. It wasn't easy for sure, but it's worked out well. I mean, last year, the runner-up for MVP, he's been a Pro Bowl guy. And, again, under your tenure as a GM, 3 playoff appearances, first division title since 1995. Do you feel like, the perception of the Buffalo Bills has changed now since you've been there, and what you're trying to develop and make this team obviously into a Super Bowl contender?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I said, I took this job, and I'll say it anywhere I'm lucky enough to work, is I want to leave it better than when I got here. And I do feel like if I, was let go tomorrow, that this place is better than when I got here. And the ultimate goal, though, is to win this Lombardi. And so while we've had some success and our fan base is, anybody that knows Bills Mafia knows how passionate they are. And it's funny, I work for the Pagulas, but I also feel like they're like shareholders, and that I work for these fans. And it's fun because there is no fan base like it. I mean, I love my time in the Carolinas, and I'll probably retire in the Carolinas. I got a lot of family and friends there. But there's no fan base anywhere that rivals what these people do. And when we travel, I mean, our fans take over places, and it's fun to work for them. We go down to Miami, we go to even Tennessee. We lost on Monday night a couple of weeks ago. We had a huge following of Bills Mafia. And so we've done some really good things, but I can tell you until this team made 4 straight Super Bowls in the 90s. And, I wasn't here, but I know those were 4 gut punches. I've lost 2 Super Bowls myself. And so, no sleeping here, no resting on winning a division or, winning X number of games or just getting a quarterback. Until we win that Lombardi, we're going to be doing everything we can here to get to the top.
Yeah, 1990 to 1993, as you said, they win the AFC Championship and get to the Super Bowl, losing, unfortunately. But I guess, is that the standard in Buffalo? Is that kind of what everybody, the previous coaches, previous GMs, everybody, the previous owners are kind of chasing the early 90s, Jim Kelly, Thurman Thomas, Andre Reed, Bruce Smith, those teams? Is that the ones that are kind of the standard bearers for this organization?
No doubt. You have to learn from history, and we enjoy the history of those guys. And I've become, really good friends with a lot of them. I was with Thurman Thomas this past weekend, flying down to the Pagulas' wedding, and Jim Kelly's very supportive. Bruce Smith comes up and, we'll work with some of our guys, talk to our team. And A lot of those guys from the 90s, and some of them still live here. Jim didn't come from here. Thurman didn't come from here. But these guys, they've made their homes here and raised their family in this community. That's how much this area means. This area is a lot like, in its own way, where I grew up. It's blue collar. It's neighbors helping neighbors. That's the slogan of the city of good neighbors, and it truly is. People with big hearts that you can really connect with, and it's real easy to see. Listen, when our players go into a grocery store, or it doesn't have to be Josh Allen. I'm talking, these people know who our long snapper is. They know who our fifth wide receiver is. Like, you don't have that in most places, and it's really unique. When you show up to a game here in Orchard Park, it looks like you're going to a NASCAR race. There's RV campers everywhere all weekend long. It's not just show up on game day for a few hours, pop a grill up, cook a couple burgers. Like, I'm telling you, today's Friday. We play on Sunday here. There will be RVs lining up tonight and tomorrow morning for a whole weekend, and it's a privilege to be in the position I am.
Yeah, the Bills Mafia, as you said, certainly a great fan base for you guys. Let's talk about something else that you've kind of tied in. You're talking about the community. How about tell me about Bills Muttfia and what you and your wife are doing in the community there?
Yeah, it's funny how we're big animal lovers, and we have a couple dogs that were both rescue dogs, and we realized how much joy and love they bring to our family, and we treat them like kids, as many people do their pets. So, Stephen Hauska, who was a kicker here, he and his wife Lindsay had started it. They called it Hauska's Pups or something like that, and when we let him go, that was the one thing his wife said, well, what about this program we started? And we said, listen, they were neighbors of ours, and we'll take this over. And so we renamed it because it was more than just dogs. It was, so any home game that we score a touchdown, we pay for the adoption of an animal. And while most of them end up being dogs, it's cats, it's pigs, it's rabbits. I mean, it's everything. It's crazy, and they all have names, and they call them draft picks. They do it like football. You've been drafted, and so it's fun. And last year was the first year we started it, and it was great. We scored 501 points. So those are fun checks to write to help a good cause. And the SPC A here in Erie County is they've been a great partner with us to help save a lot of these animals that do need homes.
Well, that's great. You always again hear about players doing good stuff in the communities, but GM, front office guys as well. It's always good to see that. Almost done here. I want to talk about something else I read in your bio. You're a big Pearl Jam fan, an Eddie Vedder fan, and I guess that in high school in the '90s, that's about when they were coming up. Have you been to some shows? Have you ever had a chance to meet Eddie Vedder?
I've not had a chance to meet him, and I don't, being in this business, I don't get starstruck, if it's, whoever it is. But Eddie Vedder's the guy that I've said for a long time I would get a little starstruck trying to meet him. Athletes don't really faze me, and I've been around, some other celebrity type people. But, Eddie Vedder, I'm a big fan. Yeah, I've seen him several times. The last time was a couple years ago. They were at Wrigley. It was pre-COVID. I think it was the summer of 18 or summer of 19. I can't remember, but yeah, they played in Wrigley Field, and Wrigley's a great venue anyway. And to go see those guys there, Eddie was originally from Chicago, so he's a Bears and Cubs fan. So he always works Wrigley into when he's doing a North American tour. And but no, a big Pearl Jam fan. It's funny, my kids. So a lot of times I'll have on Pearl Jam radio in the car, and they never have really liked it. But now that I got one in college and the other, they're starting to like it, and they're starting to, even though they bust my chops for a long time, they didn't like it. Now they're starting to come around, and they realize why I like them so much.
Yeah, for them it's probably considered classic rock, though, right?
Yeah, they don't understand the alternative grunge or anything like that. But that was a great time in the early '90s with those guys in Nirvana and some of those bands. That was right up my alley. And I've got several DVDs of some of their performances, and they put out a Pearl Jam 20 that's now 10 years old. They're now on 30 years going. It's crazy how time flies. It feels like I just bought that DVD a couple years ago, and it's 10 years old now.
Is that what you're listening to when you're running those marathons? You said, you ran one in 2010, I think, here in Wilmington.
Yeah, they were definitely. I do a mix. I try to have some mellow stuff too, so I'm not going. But I definitely had them towards the end when I needed that push. Some of my favorite Pearl Jam songs.
And one last thing, I know you were a distinguished alumnus here at UNCW as well. Named that a couple of years ago. What does that honor mean to you? Where you got your start here, where you kind of realized where your future maybe was going to lead to. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, it means a lot. I'm a big supporter of UNCW, and really, without UNCW, who knows what my journey would have been. I met some, important people there, and as I told you, nobody more important than Frank Trimble, and Pat Colma was a close teacher of mine who's retired from there now, and gave me great sound advice on how to attack things as I was concluding my college career, and have become very close to Jimmy Bass there. Who I think's done a great job, and I'm a big fan of his work, and really just love following the school. If we could ever get a football program there, I'd be really fired up. I talked to Chancellor Sartorelli about it. I know he's retired, but 4 or 5 years ago, when it was maybe my last year in Carolina, as UNC Charlotte was getting their program going. So I'm not going to give up on that, and I'll be supporter number one if that initiative ever gets going. So whatever you can do, Mike, to get that going, that'd be great. But I'll always back UNCW, and it's where I met my wife as well. So it's a great place. I don't make it back there enough. It's hard, but it's always fun to get back to Wilmington.
Well, I had the pleasure of talking to you when you did come back for that award, and we greatly appreciate your time today, right in the middle of your football season, and one I know that you're hoping ends up with a trip to the Super Bowl. We'll be rooting for you and all Bills Mafia as well. And Brandon Beane, we greatly appreciate your time here today with us.
You got it, Mike. Thanks for having me, and please tell everybody down in Wilmington, hi from Buffalo.
Well, once again, my thanks to Brandon Beane for joining us here right in the middle of the NFL season. Can't thank him enough. Have to thank the UNCW Alumni Relations Group as well for helping connect us to him. We hope you enjoyed that conversation with him. And I know whether you're part of Bills Mafia or not, you might be rooting for the Buffalo Bills here this season. Love to see them succeed. Great job by the general manager, Brandon Beane. Again, thank you for joining us here today. Thank you for joining us as well. Stick with us. We've got more great guests coming. So stick with us all year long, every week, right here in the front row with Mike Vaccaro. Have a great day, everybody.